Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show tonight. It is Thursday night, which means it's time to dive into yet another Seahawks game. The Seahawks are taking on the Steelers. Only got two of these games left this year. Only got two games left. And the Seahawks have a lot to play for. There's a lot at stake here. There's a lot to care about. So we're going to take some time to break it down with Brandon of the Hawks Nest. Brandon, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, man. Like you say, you start to get down to the end of the season, you really value these games up because you know that it's going to be a long period of time before you get to see, football again. So just trying to, sort of savor these last couple of games and maybe a playoff appearance at that too.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we've got a few things to pull apart here as it regards this home matchup against the Steelers. But before we get into that, let's comb over this injury report real quick. We've got some interesting things going on with this team as it regards injuries. It's a lot. It's a lot right now. It's troublesome. It's concerning, I would say. So the main highlights would be K9 has not practiced yet this week. The good news with him is part of the problem is an illness. And we all know that ill football players rarely actually miss the game. They just get drugged up until they can actually play. So I think he's okay, but it's still not a promising sign.
No, I would be surprised if he probably missed the game. I think that they're going to have an all hands on deck for the most part. We'll talk about a couple of these guys that I'm a little bit maybe reticent on.
Yeah, we got Jordan Brooks, no practice yet this week. I'm not expecting him. I
That's
can't
one
see
that's
that
a no.
happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if he'll be back in time for the playoffs, honestly. Like, I think there's a wide range of possibilities here.
Agreed. I think it's got kind of that high ankle sprain sort of feel to it. It seems like I don't know if it's that one in particular, but that seems to be a little bit of what I'm sensing with it. And if it's that's a 4 to 6 weeker, and there's really no way to speed that timeline up. It just takes that long to get over that injury.
Yeah, he's a fast healer though. He's proven that a couple times already. He heals quick.
That's true. That's true. That's very true.
Mario Edwards and Draymond Jones, no practice yet for them this week. And if they miss this game, we have no defensive line to speak of. I don't know what we would do. We'd play Leonard Williams and Jaron Reed every single snap, I guess. That's all you can do.
Well, Miles Adams and Cam Young, a good amount of them. I'm sure you'd get worked in there as well. I'm imagining both those guys will play. I remember the moment in the game with Draymond Jones where he went down and he was, grabbing at his stomach and probably something to do into that area. And he came back and got a sack later on in the game. So I imagine at the very least he plays minimum.
Yeah. And new addition to the injury report today. This is maybe the biggest one. DK Metcalf with a back injury, which I don't think that's been injured with him earlier this year. He's been ribs and hip. Now he's got back. So it's just going to be one of those years for DK where there's always a little something going on.
Can't quite ever get up to that 100% spot. Just, some always kind of nagging at you. And that's unfortunate and hopefully not too serious because those backs get very, especially with his spinal. It's spinal, Brandon. Spinal. As Mike Tyson once said. Yeah, hopefully it's not anything related to that, of course. But discouraging nonetheless. But as we know with DK, I feel like he could have 7 different litany of injuries across the board, and he's still going to get out there on game day and play.
Good news is Witherspoon looks like he's going to play, looking like we're getting in the right direction there. Jamal Adams looking like he'll probably be back as well. He's practiced a couple times this week. And those are the highlights. There's some other stuff like Eskridge is still out, but at this point, that's probably not even an injury so much as is just putting him on ice. Jason Peters is out, but he doesn't even start anymore, so we can live with that. Nick Bellore doesn't play enough. Abe Lucas has been practicing all week, but at this point, I mean, it seems like he's kind of worked himself into a somewhat steady situation. So those are the main highlights with the Seahawks injury report. Steelers, the main thing is Minkah Fitzpatrick and Landon Roberts. They both have not practiced this week. Minkah in particular would be a big loss. So that's the main stuff they're working through.
I think too, they had lost Casey, their safety. And so what's interesting about that is if the safety goes out with Fitzpatrick, they just started Patrick Peterson for his second game at safety in his NFL career now.
I think that's right.
that would give them a very interesting setup back there if you're going backup free safety, especially a guy in Minka who can be a very dynamic, game-changing kind of free safety back there, very versus where they would like to be, I think, ideally, and where they started the season out. So someplace that you could definitely attack.
Okay. So that kind of sets the stage here for this matchup. So if you're cool with it, let's just go ahead and dive right in and see what we can see about these Steelers.
Let's get it.
Okay, so let's start with the side of the ball that's actually good in Pittsburgh, the side of the ball that's held their own this season for the most part, the defense. Defense gives up a lot of yards, but they don't give up points. I think they're like 22nd in yards allowed, and then they're like 7th in points allowed, something like that. It's one of those things where they force a lot of turnovers and they clamp down in the red zone, and they always manage to hang around despite not really looking that good over the course of the whole game. So when you see something like that, do you feel like it's kind of fluky and unsustainable, or do you think some teams just have a knack for giving up a lot of yards and then not giving up the big points at the end?
They do things differently on the defensive side of the ball that we do, but I think the reason comes back to some similar philosophy standpoint where they're operating from. The main one being, Brendan, that they want to prevent the big play over the top. And so you get the bend but don't break. And I think what also goes on with that, we don't often talk about this, but the bend but don't break, but why, to your point, it gets so compressed, and then that's where they suddenly find their footing there. When they get them inside the red zone, you suddenly find this defense that seems wholly different than the one that allowed the offense to move all the way up the field to the 20-yard line. My opinion on that, Brendan, is because I think the defensive play calling starts to open up. And so you have an offense that starts out the 25-yard line and it's working up some easy little crispy throws, dink, dink, dunk, kind of, and they're working their way up and they're getting in the kind of the rhythm of that. Then they get inside, let's say the 19, and suddenly they're seeing the blitz coming. Suddenly the coverages are rolling differently. Suddenly the defense is taking chances that it wouldn't take when you're in between those 20s moving up the field. And that is a purposeful part of a defense. Carroll's done it, I think, for years here. And that was a big part of even at times in the Legion of Boom years, our defense, where there was some bend but not break to it. But you are always with that, Brendan, of course, walking, as we've seen with our defense, on that razor's edge, because it's very easy for those drives to suddenly start to get converted into touchdowns when you're allowing so much convenience and ease of chains to be moved.
Right. Makes sense to me. And you got to say it's working out pretty well for them because they're winning games with a pretty bad offense. So I'm thinking about like the Seahawks defense in 2021 that was 11th in points allowed and like 28th in yards allowed. That was an example of, I don't think it worked all that well because that team wasn't winning games and didn't have success. But here it seems like they've actually found something that at the very least is allowing them to hang around in games and win it at the end at the very least.
Yeah, and they get to do things that I think, like to your point on this, overcoming a little bit. They have a good defense, but maybe they're playing even a little bit better, to your point on the points where you look at the yards allowed. But there's also that taking the chance aspect of their defense. I tell you, it does kind of warm my heart a little bit, Brendan, when you have a team in the Steelers that are renowned for being this 3-4 team going back into the 80s. We're gonna set the world on fire with this zone blitz concept, right? Which is essentially the overload one side of a line, drop a defender out on the other side of the line into coverage, and renowned for that, confusing the hell out of you, sending casino blitzes, just coming at you, just, avalanche is how you sort of feel as an offense. And to still see them, as you watch some tape on them now, they're not running it at the propensity they ran it years ago, but you can still see the faint echoes of that old defensive styling within that. You're still seeing at times TJ Watt drop back in coverage as they try to roll the full house blitz to the other side. And so why they do have a little more success, or why they might even have a leg over that defense you mentioned in 21 of the Hawks, is that they will take those chances and risks. They will create confusion. They will find their ways to be multiple. Like Brendan, they run still the 3-4 still. They'll run it pure when they want to stop you on rundowns, but then they'll go to 4 down linemen when they want to go to rushing the passer at times, and everybody's got their hand in the dirt. Or they'll have 3 guys with their hand in the dirt and it's Watt standing up on the edge on the other side. But they're going to do things to where you're not ever sure of what they're doing defensively, even if they don't have the most top end, high end talent defensively to go get it done.
Right. So start breaking down the defense in terms of personnel, because we just did a pretty good rundown of them schematically. It's pretty impressive what they're doing over there. But they've got a pretty nice defensive line going on that 3-4 front. You've got Hayward. He's been there for a while now. I think he's been a pretty important part of that defense for a little bit. They've got Keanu Benton, a player that a lot of Seahawks fans lament not getting in the most recent draft.
Yeah, he's right behind Jalen Carter, isn't he? I think he might be
Kinda.
he might be the two that everybody's most mentions is like, what?
Mhm. And Ogunjobi has seen better days, but he's playing down there and not playing terribly or anything like that. Certainly not the player that he was on. Was it the Bengals? I think it was before.
Yeah, he's not quite the game changer, but he's at least giving you league average play when he's out there as a
Mhm.
rotational body down there on that line.
Yeah, so I'm pretty concerned about our interior offensive line against that defensive line. I got to be honest.
I am as well. My concern comes into play is that we've had issues with blitz concepts offensively this year at times, and they're going to bring that at you. We've had times issues with defenses that can bring a front four and as far as pass rush and kind of match you in that way. We've had issues at times with allowing the best player, let's say on a defense, to wreck shop because we don't consistently call upon double teaming that player, right? So you have TJ Watt coming to this game, 17 and a half sacks on the year. He's led the NFL in sacks 3 times over. Are we going to chip him? Are we going to leave him unblocked like we did a couple years ago in 2019 when, like we talked about it last week about the Carson fumble that happened, where you say, "Oh, we'll just leave that guy unblocked." Good things happen when
Mhm.
that occurs. So this is a team that can give it to you both ways on that. They don't just have to manufacture the pass rush. They can generate it with the 4. They can be multiple. They can create that confusion that's given us problems. So it's not a great recipe for us on the surface of that. And I just, and to add on, even on the other side of it, I think that Highsmith has started to develop himself into a pretty solid option across from Watt as the other edge over there. He's a guy with a lot of good get off, a lot of good dip and bend to him, and a guy that, is going to give you everything he's got. Nasty little spin move that he brings on the side for the counter inside when he gets a tackle to overset too much. He's only got 7 sacks on the year, but still, when you watch the tape with him, I think he flashes a lot more with the pressures and the hurries. And between him and Watt corralling it off the edges, you mentioned Benton. What he does best right now, Brendan, is rush the passer. So you're getting him up the gut, Hayward up the gut in the pass rush, the edges. You're seeing at times pockets fall back quickly. And that's where I am worried about our offense coming into it really from that front. I'm not as concerned with the secondary. They've got the rotating parts at the safety position, their corners, even though the youngster out of Penn State's having a good year for them.
Order, yeah.
Porter, I don't think that they're going to be able to necessarily lock our receivers up on the outside, but are we going to have the time to throw it to those guys? Or are they going to get home too quick?
Yeah. Is this the best edge combo in the league? Is this better than Bosa and Mac?
I would probably put Chase Young Bosa over the top of it.
Mhm.
I can't give the Mac Bosa combo its top dollar anymore, Brendan, because Bosa's injured too much.
Mm.
And that's just, you got to be out there and playing it. Is this the best one? It feels like there should be a better one that I could call to mind of. But to be honest with you, as I go through,
Young Bosa is probably better, yeah. But other than that, like I can't think of too much else that's better. Like, what are the Ravens running out? The Ravens don't really get all those sacks by virtue of their starting edge 1-2. They
no,
they do it by
Clowney's
doing
having
a
a
lot of
great
stuff.
Clowney's having a career year kind of right now, but Odafe's still coming along as a player. And like you, to your point, Matabuke inside and Travis Jones
Mhm.
inside. I think you might they're number 2, maybe, Brendan, to your point on this. I'm trying to think the number 1 of who else. And every team that I'm going to in my mind, I'm going, well, I can find one guy here, but not there, one guy here, but not there. But I can't think of any other team that draws to mind on it.
Who's across from Miles Garrett these days? It's
Zadarius Smith, that does have a beat.
that is pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. Zadarius
But
can still rush the passer, so that probably has it nipped. Because at
mhm.
least Garrett's as good as TJ Watt. And I would say that if I've got to pick between, much as I do like Highsmith, if I pick between Highsmith and even in this aging Zadarius Smith, I'll still go with Zadarius. So
Okay.
probably go.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Um, I will say though, the Steelers obviously let Devin Bush go before the season. We signed him. They might be kind of missing him right now because it doesn't seem like they're bringing much to bear with their interior linebackers. If you look at them, not really big names, not really guys who seem all that productive, not guys that seem to be very stand out. Is there anything there you think maybe we could take advantage of, that interior linebacker spot?
Well, boy, when you talk about if we're going to end up seeing both Quan Alexander and Miles Jack, two guys that have had a lot of the tread ripped off their tires, if they're going to be out there on the football field, you'd love to be able to try to work down this defense. And I would just say in general, I know not all games, there's a lot of openings in the secondary attack, Brennan, and there's always a pull to be balanced offensively. But if you're talking about one pathway and approach in what is now the second to final game of the season, where both teams are going to be wore down, both teams are going to be tired, you got an aging defense here. You got a lot of older names on this. Keanu O'Neal, Quan Alexander, the Hayward guy. I mean, even TJ is no spring chicken at this point. Patrick Peterson. If I can lean on that defense and wear them out with the time of possession and utilize the ground game, which that's going to test linebackers as much as anything else, right? Is the ground game with it. I think that they've got players up front that it's going to be hard to find those holes, but nonetheless, test how well these linebackers can play that running game. Most of the tape I watched, they were pretty good with it for the most part. And they don't do things like the Steelers, Brendan, of giving you those natural holes like we do with our defensive front, right? Where they don't do the two interior defensive tackles in the outside. They'll run a pure 3-4. So you're getting that extra 5-man line of scrimmage in the ground game. You're getting that natural difficulty theoretically. But Carroll's A and B gap rushing preference, Brendan, and hitting that does tend to hammer sometimes those 3-4 defenses because of the natural gap that you'll get between, if you can land, the solo block of the center on the nose tackle and your two guards, right? Because then the A-B gap will actually have some opening there that you can go at.
Yeah. I would love to be able to run the ball. I agree. My fear, the obvious fear, is our interior offensive line going to allow it? Because last week we were playing a bunch of backups in Tennessee. No Jeffrey Simmons. I think they were missing one other guy as well. They still couldn't hold up. Yeah. So I haven't heard anything about Phil Haynes this week. So he's clearly not ready yet. So we're going to be rocking the same guys we've been rocking for a while. And I just don't know if those guys are going to be able to get the job done. I think this line is slowly starting to move in the right direction in terms of pass protection. They've been better lately. But the run blocking it's just not going to be there this year, I don't think.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, it's hard to have much confidence in that when you've yet to have it in weeks and weeks on hand, and you're watching so many carries from our backs where they're really doing the heavy lifting on the run, early penetration, no holes being generated. It's just been an issue. And at this point, we're so deep in the season to believe it's going to go the other way right now, especially up against a good defensive front. It's going to be probably pretty hard. This would be a game that you'd love to go to Waldron and whisper in his ear, be varied, attack to the edges of the defense, test this team speed of the Steelers and see if you can, with some of those players, can they get to the edge? But that's again been something that we've not necessarily committed to doing. So it's always one of those things we, as you and I have talked about, I talk about a lot of something that we just don't really want to be committed to doing. You and I can theoretically think it's something that would be strong to work with, but we know the team's going to lean into what it does. Pass outside the numbers and hammer the A and B gap runs and try to throw 9 routes over the top. And that'll be the
until
way
until it's 3rd and 14 with the season on the line. Then they go.
That's right. That's right. Unless you need the last minute drive, that last minute fourth quarter drive, then everything's in play at that point. It's kind of like the bend but don't break defense, right? Everything's
right.
You're very restricted. Then you get inside the 20 and okay, now the whole book comes out.
And yeah, like you said, the secondary, if they don't have Minkah Fitzpatrick, they're in a tough spot because that forces Peterson to play safety, like you were saying. That forces Thompson on the field. He's not been very good for them at safety. Their other cornerback opposite Porter has been Levi Wallace, who has not been particularly good this year. He's been his career's on like an M. Night Shyamalan type of downswing, it feels like. He was really good back in, I want to say, 2018, I remember. A lot of the advanced metrics loved him, and it's been a road to the bottom ever since then.
It can happen. Guys can have those pop out seasons that just sort of kind of just pitter out a little bit. And this is where we attack. As much as I would love to be able to lean on the ground game and bleed out this clock, shorten this game, Brendan, lean on the home crowd to make their offense uncomfortable. I know that we're going to probably have to score our share of points. And I know that we're going to probably have to make our share of headway through the air in how we do it. And the good news is there's a lot to attack in that secondary. I think that's where there's definitely the vulnerability to go after. And if you get the single matchups, to your point, opposite Porter, Whoever they got lined out on that side. I mean, I got to hammer that if I'm Geno. If I've got Patrick Peterson back there at safety, starting his third game in safety, and he's got to play a cover 2 look and try to enter. I'm going to see if I can fit the ball in there on him, and Patrick didn't play a bad game last week, but I'm going to try to, definitely test that out because there's going to be some bumps in the road when you're making that kind of transition like that.
All right, so that's really about all there is to say about this defense. I feel like the game just comes down to, can our tackles hold up against those edge rushers? If they do, I think we'll be okay. I think we'll be able to attack that secondary with our receivers who are really, I mean, hopefully we have our receivers, right? We hopefully have Metcalf, but we should be able to just kind of get what we want against the secondary, I think. And I know, saying that coming off the heels of that Tennessee game, facing that secondary, a bunch of third and fourth stringers and having limited success, I know I'm kind of putting myself at risk of looking foolish, but I do think that I feel like if we can contain Highsmith and Watt, we'll be good.
Agreed. And I think that there's going to be freer yards to be found in this defense than other defenses because they do have that penchant of trying to protect against the deep ball. There's a lot of throws I saw in film, Brendan, with our Seattle route special, which is that 10-yard out route to Lockett or DK that they love to run. There's a lot of those easy completions I saw on tape. And so we're going to have those in this game to call upon and utilize. And then there is the other stuff in the middle of the field too on this defense, just short. They're just not going to give you the big stuff over the top. So you got to earn your way up the football field, but commit to, doing that. Commit to that. Don't step outside of it because they're going to try to box you into throwing that interception. Like you said, that's the way this defense kind of twists the tables a little bit as they get you into the stupid play. Browning was rolling out this last game and he's out there on the sideline and he's near the goal line and he just needs to throw the ball away. And instead he tries to throw this thing and puts it in the back end zone. And it's just like, you just gave him one that's where Geno's got to be in that moment. Just throw it away there. Don't give them the turnover because you'll naturally take this defense down with what they give up as far as over the course of the game in consistent drives and moving the chains and getting at least into field goal range. Maybe you're not getting touchdowns, but we've seen that with our team offensively at times, Brendan, where even we're getting touchdowns. We have an offense that has the capability when it's designed here by Geno Smith of just constantly getting you constant drives up the field. And when they're locked in, I know it wasn't that way last week, and I know it's been some rough roads at times with this offense over the back half of the schedule with tougher opponents, but they have shown you that ability to do that. And really at the behest of having the free and easy yards that the defense supplies you for some defenses that don't do it, right? San Francisco doesn't give you free and easy yards. I would say the Cowboys don't give you a lot of free and easy yards. And of course, the Ravens don't give you a lot of free and easy yards to that defense.
Right. All right. A couple of donos. We got John M429. Thank you for the $4.99. How about them Browns as a cross-conference team? I like them. Hated Chubb's injury. Wish them the best. I've never seen a good Browns team that I remember. Yeah, and just as this chat was just now, literally like 2 minutes ago, the Browns clinched a playoff spot.
Mm-hmm. They're in contention for the number 1 seed too in that conference, which is pretty incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll tell you, if they can make a run and they face, I think most people would still say probably the Niners are the favorite to come out of the NFC. Like the way they play defense and the way the Ravens play defense is like kryptonite for that Niners team. So if obviously after the Monday night game, the Christmas game, a lot of people are saying like, hey, it's going to be Ravens Niners and the Ravens are just going to stomp them because it's a good matchup. But if the Browns can find their way to the Super Bowl, I think would be in great shape against a team like the 49ers.
Yeah, I think that my opinion on the Ravens is that any NFC team they play, they should be a 10-point favorite against them. Just my opinion. I don't care who it is, Eagles, Niners, Cowboys, I don't care. Just they're that good. They're that tough of a matchup. And as we have the track record, Brendan, of Lamar against NFC teams, there's something to not playing a guy and playing him for kind of the first time or for the first time in 3 years, 4 years, because he is such a unique quarterback at the position and way he can do it, especially with how he's grown his game this year. The Browns are dangerous. It's wonderful to see what they're doing. Flacco's a great story here. It's a little bit of like Nick Foles back with the Eagles a couple of years ago, stepping in as he is. The Chubb injury was brutal, John, no doubt about it, because imagine where this team would be without that, because he is a top 2 back in this league when he is healthy and at his best. Mm-hmm. But this also shows you of why it's not always easy to evaluate these head coaches merely on the back of the wins and losses or how they're trending with that you got to dive into the deeper stuff. And I've really liked Stefanski for a while, and he had his best season in there when he walked in the door. And now he's returning back to that after having these dip down seasons. But he's also had to deal with a lot of stuff that's perilous as far as his quarterback situation throughout that time, and maybe never more so than this year. And he's maybe done his best job around that. And he has really impressed me this season with how you watched this game tonight, how he's just manufacturing stuff. He's a master of the screen game and his use of two tight ends. He's finally gotten David and Njoku to the place you and I both thought David could be coming out. As I think we both liked him quite a bit when he was coming out of Miami. But it's great to see. It's great to see.
Yeah. Stefanski, by the way, if Stefanski doesn't win Coach of the Year, then they should burn the award down. Like,
agreed.
I know he's not the favorite right now, but this is ridiculous. Like, I think he's won a game with like 5 different starting quarterbacks this year.
Yeah. And you can see it, and it's like when they played us in the game, it's just he caught us every time that we were getting too over aggressive. He hit us in the screen game. His timing and understanding of that stuff, the varied approach to how he runs what he runs. He's very unique as an offensive mind. He isn't like Shanahan. He's not like McVay. He is his own kind of thing. And it's been very impressive to get that done, Brendan. I mean, you hitched your horses to the Deshaun Watson. You didn't have the money to go get like some quality backup you could sit on. So you've had to just piecemeal it through.
Mm-hmm. All right. So yeah, congratulations to the Browns. They're going to be fun. And I mean, we might get Browns versus Ravens in the playoffs, which would be a lot of fun. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. It'd be a great matchup.
Kasra Solari, thank you for the $4.99. With the JSN and Bobo's play, do you believe we officially have the best receiver core?
Yeah. Nobody's got 4 deep like we've got, much less the 3 deep we've got. I don't know who. I mean, certainly Miami with their Waddle and Tyreek are a good one too, but then their 3-4 can't match up, in my opinion, with our 3-4. So I would say my opinion is yes. The Eagles got a nice Devontae Smith and AJ Brown, but their 3-4 can't touch our 3-4.
Well, I'm still looking at the Bengals, who I just think what they've done this year is really impressive. They've made Jake Browning look good. Jake Browning, like not an NFL quarterback in the slightest, has actually looked really good this year because he's been able to work with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd. And I really like their depth too. I like Charlie Jones. I like Yoshivas, I think the Yale guy. He's fun.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still looking at the Bengals and thinking that might be better. But I think we're probably second place right now, if I had to guess.
Yeah, see, I do like the Bengals receiving core. They're right next to us on it, and maybe Jamar's a little bit maybe better than DK, but I don't think T. Higgins is far and away better than Tyler, and he's had a quiet year this year. He's missed a lot of games this season. On top of that, and entirely in Tyler Boyd's point, he's averages under 10 yards a catch. He's got 64 catches this year, but it's taken him almost 100 targets to get there. He's two touchdown receptions on the year from Tyler out of the slot. I think Bobo's better. I think Jason's better than that. And I think Bobo's better than I do think Asovos has been okay, but he's also had some drops. He's been some of the rough edges we thought. Another guy that's got almost a 50% catch rate and only 10 catches on the year.
Yeah, I mean, there are problems there, don't get me wrong, but I like the potential. I like Charlie Jones too. That was actually one of my guys in the draft that I really liked.
Definitely.
I don't know. I think that the top end is obviously more important than the bottom end. And I think Jamar Chase is a decent amount better than Metcalf. I think Jamar Chase is like top 3, top 2 in this league, honestly. Him, Tyreek, and Justin Jefferson in some order would be my top 3. I don't think DK's there. I mean, Higgins is obviously falling off, but really, I mean, Lockett, we're starting to see some slippage as well, a little bit. I don't know. I still kind of look at that Bengals receiver core, and I think they're a little bit better. But I don't know who number 3 would be, right? Like, number 3 would probably be Miami just on the strength of Tyreek Hill, but they don't really have any depth. They have Cedric Wilson, I think.
Yeah, I don't think that it would be somebody who has a 1-2, but not really a 3-4. And I don't know on the Jamar. Like, I love Jamar. He's my favorite player coming out of the draft the year he came out. And I'll give you that he's probably a little bit better than DK. I don't know how far that separation really truly is, because utilization and the quarterback throwing you the ball make a big difference. And while Browning's been able to find Chase at times this year, he's made most of his headway with Burrow back there slinging the rock to him this season and throughout his career. And I don't think DK's had the same equivalency as far as what he's had. He doesn't have the coach with that they've got there with the Bengals who knows and will work to utilize Jamar to his utmost. So that's where we come back to a little bit, in my opinion, of the lack of fully topping out the DK potential that exists there. And some of that not all just falling on DK's shoulders where if he's not doing it good. No, it's more about those other factors coming into play, in my opinion. I'm not saying Jamar is a little bit better, but I think it's a very tiny difference. And I'll say, as much you want to say about maybe Tyler having the down year and maybe he isn't taking the 9 routes over the top of the defense anymore, but the bottom line statistical outlook for Tyler as he finishes this year for what he's projected to be on pace for is he's going to be right in alignment with where he's been for the last 5 or 6 years. He's never been a 1,100 yard receiver. It's never been who he's been. He's always right around 1,000 yards for a season, but that's part of the consistency it brings. And that's what he's bringing this year again, which brings a big value in itself, as evidenced by a guy like T. Higgins, who's going to fall probably good couple hundred yards short of 1,000 because of that injury situation.
Yeah. The Bobo factor is an interesting wrinkle, right? Because he's actually really useful. I know he doesn't have the big numbers, but he's definitely more useful than a guy like Yoshivas as of right now. That's an interesting part of this and makes this, I think, a little bit more competitive.
Yeah. And I think that this is an important part to include the 4, Brendan, because you have 17-game season, the 2 Thursday night games. These fourth receivers are being more part of the offense they've been. And I mean, let's just go between the difference of Sovos. 18 targets, 10 catches. He's averaging 8 yards a catch. Bobo on the other side of it, 23 targets, 17 receptions, 183 yards receiving, and 2 touchdowns. He also ran one in as well. So just way more impact of what you've gotten from Bobo this year than Andre on the other side of that with the Bengals in every way. Higher yard per catch, more touchdowns, more efficiency in the receiving on that, just every which way but loose.
Yeah, I think next year we would be better than the Bengals. I think we're headed in that direction because DK's still young. JSN's going to get a lot better next year. Bobo too. I just don't know if we're there yet. I'm not quite there yet.
That's hard when you're talking about the top 2, man. The separation's always much closer than it is further apart at that area.
Right. Okay, so now let's flip things over to that Steelers offense, and this is definitely the problem with the team this year, I would say. They haven't been very good. They don't score much. They didn't really do that well with Kenny Pickett at quarterback. They did actually have probably their best game of the year with Rudolph last week, but I think that had as much to do with the Bengals not playing well as anything else. I don't read a ton into that. I'm not sitting here thinking that Mason Rudolph is some much better quarterback than Kenny Pickett. So I'm still looking at this offense in kind of the same way I would have regardless. They got good receivers. They got interesting receivers, but not a ton else that really excites me. So, yeah, those receivers, let's just talk about what they've got in terms of the ball catchers here. George Pickens has been good this year. Deontay Johnson's been good this year. And remember, they are working with very lackluster play at quarterback. So everything they do is all the more impressive.
Yeah, they have. And guys, you could make the argument, especially in Deontay Johnson and Pickens, 2 guys more built to have a quarterback with a big arm, kind of all the old Big Ben, some of the throws that he could make and getting up the field and separating out that way. And that they're both held and probably impinged a little bit by the fact that they both, doesn't matter who the quarterback's been out there, be it Pickett, Trubisky, or now as they're to their third guy here in Randolph, none of them have really the prerequisite arm strength to always make every throw in the book down the line. And Pickens was a guy who I had a first round grade coming out on. I loved him. I just thought he had, I didn't think he'd be a superstar, but he could be like a star level receiver with some of his physical abilities. And he's just crossed 1,000 yards coming off the best game of his season last week. He was having some questions about his effort and that type of thing. You were getting some kind of Chase Claypool vibes a bit from the way the Steeler fan base was questioning some of him a bit, but he is a problem. He's dangerous. He does that move, Brendan. You remember this, where he comes off the line of scrimmage and he's faking you, making you think he's running a route. And then he gets the cornerback rocking on the back heels and then blocks him and puts him on their butt. And technically it's a pancake, but it's just one of his little disrespectful moves. He did it to Kobe Bryant in the preseason 2 years ago. But the guy that's actually the most dangerous offensive player for them, the guy that we're going to have to account for, the guy that's going to be the biggest problem this Sunday when it all comes down to it, is going to be a man by the name of Jalen Warren. He is
Mm.
technically the number 2 running back on this team, but he is a small little bowling ball. He's got a little bit of kind of Ray Rice vibes to him in the way he runs the ball, very low center of gravity. Very hard to get him off his feet with that low center of gravity because of his balance and ability to work off contact, to break tackles that you have to get him wrapped up and pulled down, which becomes a worry for me, Brendan, because of course, wrapping up and pulling the ball carrier down has not always been our biggest thing that we bring to the table this year. That's been one place we've definitely struggled with. But he's also equally as much a problem as far as from the backfield. He's averaging, I think, over 5 yards a carry. And then he's also a guy that they feature out of the backfield considerably. Watching the tape with Randolph last week, he's not a processor where he's going 1, 2, 3, 4 on the field through his reads, but he did a lot of 1, 2, Warren, 1, Warren, 1, 2, Warren. So you could see a lot of his where he'd ignore the half the field, get back to Warren, but that's because Warren's been so useful for them out of the backfield. And once he gets the ball out of his hands, he's up to speed instantaneously, and he's got some wiggle to him as well.
Yeah, he definitely does concern me, especially Najee Harris has a bad knee and has missed a lot of practice this week. I think he'll play, but honestly, Najee Harris doesn't really impress me that much, even when he does play. It's kind of like, a little bit of Trent Richardson, a little bit of Mark Ingram. It's like, yeah, it's okay. Like,
he really can't get wide. Like, watch Kenneth Walker at times, right? Where Kenneth goes in on an inside run, and the real pathway he's got to go then, Brendan's out the back door. So he's got to get wide all the way out to the outside of the tackle. With Najee, he's got that one bounce move. So that's all he's got. So he presses the hole, and then he's going to give you one single bounce, left or right. So he presses right in the back, and if the hole's not there at first, then he's going to bounce one gap over this way, or he'll bounce one gap over, and then he's going right upfield. And there's no wiggle, there's no shake, there's no, he's a little bit of a bigger back, so it's hard to necessarily kind of bring him down from that angle of it. And if you block it up, he can go and get you that 7-8 yards. But that's his game as a back, man. He is in that corridor, wherever you're going to run him, he's going to be within these confines on the run. He ain't going to get out here. He ain't going to get out there. He's going to be right here.
mm-hmm. Yeah, not a big fan of him. So I wonder at what point they just make Warren the starter. At what point they just decide, you know what, he's clearly the better player. We got to get him the majority of the touches at the very least.
I think it'll by next year it starts to round into that place. I think because he was still a guy. If you're trying to draft in fantasy leagues at the start of this year, not many people were. You're aware of him if you were really tapped into what Pittsburgh was doing, but he wasn't necessarily thought of in that way. I think he's really captured this year where they will make him that guy going forward. And because of his size at 5'8", I think you're always going to have to load balance that with a secondary back. I don't think you can ever be a guy that's just going in this age 15, 20 touches a game too.
What do you think of Freiermuth? What do you think of their tight end? I remember actually getting pretty into him in the draft a couple years ago. I remember liking what I saw. What do you think of Mr. Freiermuth in a game like this?
Unfortunately, and not to shade the outlook you had on him, but my outlook of the guy when he came out was a guy you're going to take in the second round to be a league average tight end. That was what I saw. He can catch and he can block at basically league average rate. That's what he's going to give you. I look across the board at him this year. He's at 65 grade offensively. So he's literally at the middle ground spot that you would attribute to a guy. He has been better the past couple of years than his grade this year. I'll say that. He's not been as good a run blocker, I guess, as I thought, but maybe he's been a better pass catcher than I gave him credit for coming out in college. But I don't think he's anything more at the end of the day than other than that little bit of discrepancy of like, well, he can't really run block and clear the way, but he'll catch a little bit. He can be a little bit of a factor there, which has given us issues on certain tight ends. But I don't think that he's even, in my opinion, a top 10 tight end in the sport.
Yeah. Okay, that's pretty interesting. The weakness of that team, well, they on offense, they kind of got two. The first would be they've got a pretty mediocre offensive line. They are getting Sumalo back, who was back at practice today, which is big because he's their best, their left guard. But other than that, it's a pretty motley collection of offensive linemen on this team. They got Mason Cole starting at center. They've got Dan Moore Jr., who I think is a career backup starting at left tackle right now. Broderick Jones will be good eventually, probably, but right now he's just okay.
He's a rookie,
It's
right?
yeah, he's I think he was a relatively high, first round pick.
Yeah.
So he'll get there, but right now he's not there yet. So this is not one of the better offensive lines we played this year, and we need our pass rush to do some stuff in this game, definitely.
We need to build on the performance of last week where they had one of their best output performances. They're going to get a similar line that they faced this week that they faced last week. So to your point, that should hopefully open the door more up for you to go after and attack it. I will say the thing with Pickett and watching him is that he doesn't have a big arm and he knows it. He understands who he is and what he is at this point in time of his career. He is that, Brendan, he is that most dangerous 007 backup that has given us so many problems throughout the years in so many different faces, but all kind of wearing the same hat. And so that's going to be the key here, is making him uncomfortable, taking away the things that he wants to do that is going to be easily there schematically in what we sometimes provide, and staying patient within that. He wasn't throwing 9 routes last week. He's just staying in that pocket. Like I said, not going through a lot of progression reads. He's not doing a lot of off script plays. He's going to stay within himself. But as we've seen at times, if you have a QB that's dedicated to do that against the Seahawks defense over the years, and even a backup at that, that can be one that can give us fits. Pass rush, as you say, though, is the big part to me of this puzzle of helping that out, especially because we know the front four is going to need to get it done probably on their own.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of gets us to the other weakness of this team, which is quarterback play. Most of the season, it's been Kenny Pickett, who has been, I don't know. He's it kind of reminds me of Eli Manning. Like Eli Manning was not good, but somehow, some way, he kept winning games. It was a little like that. And Kenny Pickett is also not good, and he keeps finding weird ways to win games, but not much there. And now they got the Mason Rudolph experience, which went really well last week, but over his career, I mean, what would be your scouting report on a guy like a Mason Rudolph based off what we've seen so far?
Average mobility, sees the field really clearly, will throw with anticipation, not extra level, but just a good amount of anticipation on his throws when because he's smart with his pre-snap reads and how he's seeing the field. He's good with that. He can do some progression. He's not a 4th progression read guy, but he can get down to the 3rd guy on the progression. Pocket mobility is good, even though his mobility is not particularly good. He'd probably be below average as from a mobility standpoint, but he does have good sense and awareness for the pass rush and how to move around that, keep his eyes up the field. He's not, like I said, he's not an extender of plays, so he's not an improviser. He wants to stay within the confines of of what's being called. But he does do a good job with the field of the vision and seeing everything through too, where it's, again, just doesn't, some quarterbacks, Brendan, they get that tunnel vision on, man, your look is only to here. And it's like, there's like laser beams around your eyes going to just that look. And that's the only place you can kind of look to, and you don't have any peripheral. It's got a little bit more of a peripheral to him. Not a very big arm, but a good release. He's not got anything like a long windup or anything like that, but he can get it out accurately. It's going to take some time to get there at times, though, especially as we talk about being now in winter in the elements, when those kind of guys that aren't the hardest pushers of the ball you feel tangibly a little bit of their loss of arm strength. Right? There's definitely a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo that showed up a lot with, where he might look good when it's warm and sunny out, but boy, once it starts getting cold, you can really feel that ball not coming out of his hand all that great. He's kind of a little bit like that, where it's not going to explode out of his hand, but he'll get it to the spot, he'll get it on time, and he'll get it there accurately.
Yeah, and I know Rudolph is a veteran, and he's kind of seen it all at this point because he's played in enough games over the years, but we should be able to affect him in Lumen Field at this point in the season with so much on the line. There should be some effect from the there should be
crowd.
some effect from our fan base, from the crowd.
Yeah. Well, and that's where, if you're bringing the blitz, like even in this one, you don't have to, even if you're us Carroll on this one, I go, okay, you don't want to blitz in this game, Carroll, or hurt. I get that. Bring some of those stack fronts and drop him out, though. Get him some confusion, because what you do when you have that there in the stadium, Brendan, in my opinion, is now we start getting those quarterbacks trying to make their check calls and move their protections. And bam, that's where you get the false starts. That's where you get the delay of games. That's where you get a lot of the confusion starting to come into play. And you don't even have to blitz guys at that point. You can drop the guys back out at the post snap if you want, but just forcing, and Rudolph, that's one place you can take advantage of, I think, with him a little bit, is, and he's going to want to be on his details and be right out there, right? On the things he can control. he's going to want to take advantage of those things, like getting his protections in the right spot, but not being as aware of the fact that you're playing in a stadium that's one of the loudest in football, which isn't always going to let you put those protections in place.
So, with all that being said, what is the recipe here? How do we get this win? Assuming, by the way, that we have Witherspoon and Adams back, but maybe assuming we don't have Jordan Brooks back, let's say, because that seems to be the safe bet right now.
Well, you're definitely going to be looking at needing to defend the run out of nickel really well.
Mm-hmm.
And because they're not going to lean into trying to pass more than a bare minimum aspect of it, they will lean on the two ball carriers that they have to go to here. And in Tomlin's case, he will dirty up this game and he'll shorten it. He'll reduce down the possessions. He doesn't care about needing to score a lot of points. So if it's effective all day, getting 5 and 6 yards on the ground game, they'll go and get it. And they run, by the way, fly sweeps. They work the outside in their running game. They're very diverse in how they operate that. So we can't just count on them trying to hit the inside with us on the runs. And that includes Najee. Even though Najee is really more of an inside runner, they will still throw pitch plays to him on the outside. They'll still work him in that way. And so we're going to have to first and foremost stop the run, stop it at a nickel, which means Jamal and Spoon are going to have to play it like Sam linebackers down there. They're going to have to be aggressive with that. They're going to have to come down and tackle and take on blocks and get off blocks. All hands are going to need to be on deck, especially without Jordan Brooks and Devin Bush on the field in place. I think Devin did okay last week, but certainly didn't give you any real splashiness out there either on the other side of it. So you stop in the run first, creating confusion in the path, creating confusion for Rudolph at the very least up at the line of scrimmage pre-snap in order so that you get him thinking a little bit. Don't let him get into a rhythm. Don't make it easy on him in this game, Brendan, by allowing the short routes all day long, by dropping into great depth and coverage in zone coverage, because he's not going to test you there. He's not going to test you there a lot. You know, maybe he'll make a couple throws here and there, but he's going to try to live short, middle of the field. He's going to try to get Jalen Warren 6 or 7 catches in this game out of the backfield. And if you work to take that stuff away, then you can start to put him in that box and make him uncomfortable.
Yeah, and that's what kind of concerns me about this game, because we have a run defense that has been, I think, literally the worst in the league over the last, I want to say, 5 games. Literally giving up more yards and I think a higher yard per carry average than any other team. So things have really deteriorated there, and it does. Some of it is almost by design because we have those 2-man fronts. But I am worried about our ability to fundamentally stop the run. So this could end up being a game kind of like Tennessee, where your run defense is really bad, but your pass defense is so good it kind of overcomes that a little bit, because at some point you have to make plays through the air. This isn't the 1960s.
You're right. That's kind of the way it did play out a little bit last week, where you never really did stop the run, but you just kept it closed down enough to where you didn't let it run wild. You didn't let Henry go for 140. You kept him under 100. Maybe they found some, but like you say, this is the NFL. You can run a bit, but you do have to eventually, throw the football. And then to your point on that, the other side of that then has got to be that you got to squeeze down on those routes, because you're not going to shut it down by just dropping his own depth. You're going to need to run more man-based principles on the outside to get there at times. And do they have the willingness to do that or not in this game? Be interesting to see what approach they take, if they take a bit of a different approach with this one, because the Steelers are going to want to go into their weaknesses. They're going to want to go at that thing that has, as you just said, been not only vulnerable this year, but been as most vulnerable in this last even 5-game stretch. So you got to find the answers. And you got guys, you're coming in walking wounded at that position a little bit. Maybe Miles Adams can burst on the scene here in place of Edwards.
I've always liked Adams. It seems like the coaching staff doesn't seem to think there's much there. They're playing Cam Young over him, and Cam Young's been all right. I don't have a big problem with that, but I am disappointed that Miles Adams can't crack the rotation, because we could really use a rotation.
We could. He became the odd man out certainly after the Leonard Williams trade, and and like you said, he's even got a sack this year. I mean, he's had some moments. So he hasn't played bad.
He had that great moment last year, remember, when he was running onto the field and he couldn't get lined up in time, so he chucked the tight end at the line of scrimmage so he could do something.
Right. Yeah.
And I said, that is one of the coolest plays I've ever seen. Like, to just immediately go from, oh crap, I'm out of position, to, okay, what can I do to help the team on this play? And just turn to his left and chuck the tight end at the line of scrimmage. That was beautiful.
Oh yeah, it was a heady ass play, and I loved it. Yeah, he's flashed at times for us. He has. He's had some moments. He's never really been run out there for a long period of time, but maybe he will be called upon this week. We'll see if, or like you say, maybe they do like Cam Young too. So, and like you said too, Cam's just done a decent job as well. Both the guys have given you something when they've been out there. They haven't been flashy, but they've been somewhat solid.
Yeah, so I mean, every team needs guys like that, guys who just play and they play. They don't play really well, they don't make a lot of plays, but even the best teams in the league have a couple of guys like that.
Yeah. So you can load balance and keep your frontline guys fresher all that much more when you can at least run them out there and have them give you a little bit.
So not a ton else to talk about with this Steelers team. I feel like I think we ran it down good. They've got a really good kicker. What's his name? God, it's not Jeff Reed anymore. That was a long time ago. For some reason, when I think Steelers kickers, I think Jeff Reed. That was like the mid 2000s. Oh, Chris Boswell. He's been really good for them. He's one of the highest paid kickers in the league. It's a Godwin Icky Bicky revenge game.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Just kick it through the back of the end zone. Just kick it through the back of the end zone. Don't test him. Don't do the thing there. Don't do the thing you're going to want to do, Carol. No. Kick it to the back of the end zone because we don't want to give them free yards on a kickoff like at the 40, 50-yard line. I want to make this offense earn everything it gets in this game with where I think that offense is at with them on their third quarterback. Make nothing easy. No stupid turnovers from the quarterback position to give them short fields. And no kickoffs to Ugabuki, who he knows like an automatic. I call him automatic 45 because he's going to put you up at that 45-yard line almost automatically.
Yeah, he was good. And I actually don't know how good he's doing this year, but I like that guy. It was too bad we couldn't make room for him.
Indeed. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but he was good.
Yeah, and
checking the score right now too, see if I could find a score.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see it. I got it up here.
Yeah.
No. So he's at 76. Good score.
Okay, I can dig that. Good
fourth highest rated special teams player for them.
Good for him. So yeah, kind of a shorter show, but I think we ran it down everything that we could. So the only thing left is how do you see this one playing out?
So I think that I think the fans are going to bring their best foot forward and they can have an impact when I think our fans are at their biggest breath. I'm not trying to say that that's the key in this one, but that's going to, I think, be a factor here. The home field advantage is going to come in strong on this one. I think the team's going to be playing with a certain kind of spirit to understand that our back's against the wall here. No real room for error, no holding back anything at this point. We can't lose this game. We got to take it. If this was on the road, I'd feel a little bit differently maybe about this game. But I do think that this is one we do take. I think that we pull it out by a touchdown on this one. So I'm going to go 24-17 in this game. I just think I think we'll do enough. I think that we'll get a couple of nice false start penalties to get them into instead of 3rd and 9, now you're at 3rd and 16 kind of things, and then you get that stop on the back, a couple of those moments, turnover here or there where we don't turn it over. And that probably becomes where you have a lot of teams just trying to make sure they play it clean, aware that one mistake could kind of be the thing that really, in this particular game, cost you.
I'm gonna say the streak remains alive. 2017 again.
I like it.
Yeah, they got a good defense. They got some stuff they can throw at us. We're probably gonna, have a turnover or two. We haven't had a turnover in quite some time. It feels like. I mean, it's only 2 games, but that is a long time in NFL speak.
Oh yeah. And it's a testament to how well the offense has done with that without the fumbles this year, Brendan. Man, we've done such a good job with that. With not, I don't know if that's a coaching point of emphasis, but it's certainly something we've done well. And I think that our quarterbacks this year have done a good job in keeping that stuff clean too.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to lose a home game to Mason Rudolph with the playoffs on the line.
That's a good way when you put it like that.
Yeah, I know there's other things going on here, like Mike Tomlin's endless quest to finish every season above 500. I know that's kind of on the line here. I don't even know who they play in the last week of the season, but
well, they're sitting on clinging those playoff hopes still. Yeah. They're at 14% if they get the win coming out of this game. Not still big odds, but they're in it still at that point.
Yeah, please don't let them get in the playoffs. That would be so unfun to see Mason Rudolph in the playoffs. We don't need that.
Please, God, no. No.
Yeah. It would be so much more fun to have a team like Houston get in. So much more fun.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a variety of teams, I'd say, in the AFC you could look to say, I'd rather that team. I'd rather this team. I mean, I definitely could say. And it does seem like we're going to get a little bit of a newer crop. The Chiefs seem like they're kind of falling back this year a bit. They're not quite right. So it does seem like somebody's coming out of the AFC that's going to be a little bit different than has been going out there recently.
Mhm. So yeah, I got 2017 again. Let's get a streak going here. Let's make an unbeatable streak of like the Pistons are setting this unbeatable streak of consecutive losses.
Yeah. I've got a buddy who put a bet on them to not win another game the rest of the NBA season. He put like $20 down and be like a $50,000 win if it comes through or something, just something.
Yeah. I mean, you got to be trying to lose 28 in a row. So maybe they'll keep trying to lose.
Yeah. Well, you got the lottery there with the NBA. You want to get all those lotto balls.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the thing. They could do all this and still get like the 5th pick.
I know you can't, it doesn't tank in the NFL, NBA. It's just, it doesn't, and it does go that way. Those balls, like they're out, the odds on them. I don't know if it's the whole, Patrick Ewing cold envelope thing, but it just never seems like you're very rarely the team with the highest odds ends up with that top pick or even usually in the top couple. It's like you'll get top 3, but some NBA drafts, you're out the best prospects after the first 2. So,
yeah. I hear you. Taker, thank you for the $2. You guys have any interest in Bo Nix? All right, draft talk. Let's go.
My updated big board is that Brett and I've been considering this more now as I'm starting to look at the players and we're getting prepped for our show here in a couple of weeks. We're going to do our opening mock draft, folks. So prepare yourself. Prepare yourself. Mock draft season is coming. And I now have officially 4 quarterbacks in the first round. Jaden Daniels has leaped over Penix for me on my board. I will put him in the first. I won't go top 10 city, but I will say top 20 right now until I need one more deep dive on Jaden with it. So I'm waiting to get the final. But my point on this, Brendan, is that the 5th guy who has the potentiality, I believe there's two potential dark horses to sneak into the first round at the quarterback position, maybe 3. Bo Nix, Spencer Rattler, and maybe JJ McCarthy, though I think that would be insane. I don't think there's any way JJ should be even a second round pick, in my opinion, but there's a lot of people that love JJ, and there seems to be a lot of love from JJ in some NFL circles. But that would be my guess. I think we're going to end up with 4, and I think there's a good chance 5 with one of those back end first round teams wanting that 5th year option and club control on that rookie quarterback.
Yeah, I personally can't do the Bo Nix thing. I mean, he's not bad or anything. He should probably be a day 2 pick. But I just keep seeing Rich Man's Taysom Hill.
I still have the second round grade on him, by the way. That's still officially. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah, and I just don't see it working that well in the NFL. Maybe if he finds the right system, maybe he could put it together. But we're seeing in the modern NFL, the best way to have a good, consistent offense is to have a reliable intermediate passing attack. Those are the things that are succeeding right now. If you're good in the intermediate area of the field, you're going to have a good offense. And Bo Nix, to me, is a kind of guy who isn't really going to be able to do that. He can run. He has a big arm, but he's not that accurate. And I know his completion percentage is off the charts. That's because Oregon runs all those screen passes and bubble screens and stuff. That's not because he's actually accurate on passes in the intermediate zone of the field. So I'm just not really feeling the Bo Nix in the NFL thing.
Understand all complete valid reasons. I don't think I would add a whole bunch else on. I think just one thing I'd add that I'm worried a little bit about with him is the off script stuff. And we saw with the Oregon kid and Herbert a couple of years ago coming out, that was another question with him that he answered he could do that type of stuff. But that's one place I also wonder about Nixon. You've had a lot of, to your point, scripted stuff in this offense and how it's been set up. What happens when the script gets removed at the NFL level, as will happen on a lot of plays? What are going to be your answers to that at that point? So I do think he's a second round, but I just think that 5th year option, the way quarterbacks are being paid, Brendan, that club control thing with the quarterbacks in this particular class, I think it's going to push a couple up into the back end of that first round to get that 5th year club control.
Yeah, I can't imagine it happening to Rattler, though. Like, I know he has first round talent, but the production just hasn't been there.
That's where, though, does the supporting cast and the fact that of all the top end quarterbacks, he's not only under more duress and being hit and hurried more often than any other quarterbacks in the top of this draft, it's by a considerable margin of difference. And that's playing in the toughest conference in the entire college football conference. So does a team factor that in? I don't know, Brendan. You might be right. They may just go, the production is just not there. but he has improved since coming down there to South Carolina. And he's not at any point in time had anywhere near the supporting cast of some of the other quarterbacks in this class that they've had. And I think that that's going to give him, that might get a team that looks at him with an imagination. He throws a really good ball. He's got a real, great delivery. He's got great arm strength. So there's some things to him that's really going to stand out to certain teams. And while I'll say Michael Penix has the most wow throws of any quarterback in college football this year, you could make the argument that maybe Rattler has the second most right behind him.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a passive fan of Rattler. I've been talking about Rattler for like 80 years, I feel like. He's been in college football forever, and I've always had my eye on him, but I can't do first round.
No, I wouldn't either for the, and when with Nixon, then this is just, it's that difference between what you do and what you think maybe NFL circles will do in the way I outlook on it. That I think NFL circles will look at it a little bit different, where they go, well, one team falls in love with this guy, Nix, or this guy, Rattler. But with Rattler, it's not a physical problem with me or his ability to throw. It's the neck up stuff for me. It's the leadership stuff up for me, which is, as we've learned often, is a key component here, the quarterback position. And I don't like his body language at times on the field. I'm not always a fan of how he carries himself. And it stands out every time I watch him play.
King, thank you for the $5 here. Any chance we catch them off guard for a big play within a cross formation screen to Dallas and leaving that guy number 90 unblocked? Let's go. Now, hopefully we learned our lesson there.
We love leaving defenders unblocked, King. What can I say? Especially the best ones.
And that's not to say that can't work. I'm not poo-pooing that strategy in all situations. Just you pick the right situations.
Well, you got to have misdirection, right? So let's take the game, the play at the end of the game last week with the Titans, Brendan, where you're running a shotgun run from the 2-yard line. You leave the unblocked defender coming on that play, right? Well, what you might want to do to not allow that guy to just have a free run at your running back is have a fly sweep guy going across that's coming right back at that defender that might give him a moment of hesitation. But you don't do that. And that's what you have to do, is if you leave those guys unblocked, you got to give them some eye candy going opposite of the direction that you want to be going with the play. Get them false stepping, getting them leaning into the other direction. But when you give them the full run to the play and you give them they can see it free and clear, this is where it's going, and go hunt. That just makes it easy for those edges, especially with as talented as they are. They're already hard to stop when you block them, much less when you leave them unblocked.
Yeah, so definitely don't leave number 90 unblocked. That's what I would recommend.
Please, God, don't. He'll hurt somebody.
Okay, so before we wrap up here, I do want to ask, because in the upset of the century, this is like Buster Douglas over Mike Tyson here. Nobody was really asking about the Russell Wilson stuff, which has blown the lid off the pot this week. So
yeah.
I do want to ask, you did a stream about this last night, about his, for those of you who don't know, although I'm sure all of you do, Russell Wilson was benched this week by Sean Payton and the Broncos, and is expected to be released in the offseason before his contract vests for 2025. So you did a stream on this last night. I want to know, what was the kind of conclusion you came out of from your sect of the fan base as it regards to people's stance on Russell Wilson at the moment?
We ran a poll for the good 3 hours we ran for the show, so we had a lot of votes on in. A lot of people were obviously watching because of the nature of this has a lot of people interested. So we had a lot of people coming through with a lot of eyeballs to now the poll came out with 70. I asked in the poll, would you want to have Russell Wilson come back? 72% said no. 27% said yes. I think that that's pretty indicative of also what I was reading and getting back in responses from my chat, being that most people are pretty no, and pretty loudly no, Brendan, at that. It's not a no. It's a no, and so that on the other flip side of that, the 27% that do want him back also feel kind of almost with an equal amount of passion in the way that they feel about it. So there is a little bit of draw here, but overall, I think the majority of Hawk fans lean in the direction of saying that this is not something that makes sense at this point. Geno's better. Going and draft is better. Any other options better. So I think that's where people stand. And I think that that's a pretty fair calculation here by the Hawks fan base. How about yourself?
Well, I don't know. I didn't run any kind of poll, so I don't know what people feel, but I think most people do realize that ship has long sailed for many different reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Agreed.
there's a lot working against any kind of a reunion, not the least of which is that the last thing he did when he was on the Seahawks was go behind Carroll and Schneider's back to try to get them both fired, which I know he denied, but he did it. We all know he did it, like 100%.
My
So
betting is we never got the confirm. That's the thing. We just never got that reporter that can confirm it. But if I was a betting man, to your point, I'd be betting on a yes on that it did happen.
yeah, but by the way, I mean, if it didn't happen, I think Pete and John would have said no, that didn't happen. When they were asked about it, they were like, "Yeah, we're over it." That's what they said. They're like, "We're not going to
Yeah.
hold a grudge," which is code for, "Yeah, it happened."
And then with Carroll's case, he seems to be holding a little bit of a grudge.
Yeah,
So
yeah, clearly,
to your
and
point, that
yeah,
1
mhm.
+ 1 = 2, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and there's other things. I mean, we have something kind of decent going here right now. We do.
Mhm.
I know it's not great. I know it's not been everything we expected this year, but could you imagine Wilson behind the offensive line we've had this year?
Oh, it would be
Yeah,
he would not be doing anywhere near the productivity of what Geno Smith's done. That's for sure.
yeah. It's not even close. Like honestly, the last well, we're coming up now on like what 32, 33 hours has been fascinating to see the discourse on this.
It is. And I'll tell you, Brendan, we've had a year of divisive topics in the Hawks fan base, and we just got a whole nother one. We did not, I think we've hit our fill at this point of this. I mean, there's every topic right now that's coming out in this Hawk fan base seems to be one that just derives so much emotionality from it on whatever camp lies on it. There's not really that opening, it seems like at times, for people to just be like, well, I'm just kind of watching this as it goes. I don't have as much that passionate dog in the fight, right? For instance, I tried to say this about this. I was saying, well, there's a place here where I could sign off on this, and it's coming from a complete cynicism and pessimism, right, Brendan? Because we get to the end of the season, we go, okay, I know Carroll's not going to change his offense. I know he's not going to change his defense. 2 years after those changes that were supposed to happen, they ain't happen. We got Wilson out there. Okay, Wilson gets cut. Wilson wants to rehab his image. So Wilson comes back to Seattle, says, let me come back to Seattle. I'll come back on a, let's just say, 1-year deal. I'll take $4 million. I cut Geno. I sign Russell to a 1-year, $4 million deal. Russell's trying to get his Q rating back up. You save $10 million on the cap of what you were due to spend for Geno, even with his dead money savings at that point in time. I take that $10 million, I put it into reinvesting in the offensive line. I go draft that guard. I go build a super offensive lineup for Russell Wilson, the likes of which he hasn't had in Seattle here, hasn't had in Denver at any point in time, hasn't had since basically he walked in the door.
Well, okay, can I stop you real quick right there?
Mm-hmm.
That Denver offensive line's been great this year. It has.
Great.
Yes. 100%.
Okay.
PFF ranks them 7th in the entire NFL.
Okay.
And that's with Russell Wilson playing behind it. Garrett Bowles has been great. Cushenberry's been great. Quinn Miners might make the Pro Bowl. He's one of the best guards in the league.
He is really good. That's true.
The weaknesses on that line are Ben Powers and McGlinchey. And McGlinchey's not even been that bad. And Ben Powers, I mean, I don't know what the heck's happened there. But that is a very good offensive line. And here's the most important thing. That offensive line has been 100% healthy this year. They've had the same 5-man unit for all 15 games. That is one of the best offensive lines in football. It is impossible for us to build a better offensive line than he's had in Denver. It would never happen in a million years in one off season. 0% chance.
No, there you go. And that's certainly, it's a good point on that. And I've been definitely monitoring exactly their offensive line this year, just majority of what he's gone. Again, I'm not saying I want to do this move. This is where people get a little bit lost in it. Because again, it's speaking to different perspectives and views. And that if you're going to go back to the old style of offense and that's what you want to run, part of what doesn't work this year, of course, was Peyton, is that he's trying to take some of what Russell Wilson does good and bring it on to his old offense, right? I'll do my old hybridization. And my whole point on that's been at this point of what you really got to do with Russ is you run the Russ offense and you commit to that. Well, what's the Russ offense? Power running game up in the A and B gaps and then taking shots over the top when you pull the safety up. And so again, it's completely from a cynicism view of saying at that point, I'm not saying if I reach this at the end of the year where I go, look, we're not going to update and modernize our offense. It's not happening. You're going to run the same offense. Well, if Carroll's here to remain, then you're going to run the same offense into the future that you've ever run. And if you do that, and there's a situation where you bring him in to do that, like I said, saving that $10 million as you would on the quarterback position for the year, you still go draft a guy. So it wouldn't be like that's just Russell and nothing. You'd still go in the draft and take a guy, but then try to build the lineup fully at that point in time. and then let it rip. I'm not saying it would be 100% successful or that this is the path to go or that this is what I'm signing off on doing. I would stay with Geno. I'd ride out and go draft a guy in the draft. That's the approach I would take officially. But could I see them going down this pathway and this being some way that this could, in a weird multi-dimensional universe, alternative universe situation? Kind of, it could. Weird things happen. And let's face it, Brendan, we brought a lot of guys back to this organization who have once played here in the last 2 years alone. Frank Clark and Bruce Irvin and Quentin Jefferson and Jaron Reed. And it's been a commonality of this organization to go and bring guys back into the fold. So I'm not saying I sign off of it or that I think it's, but I would wonder if they would look at it, if they're going to just buy into this, say, look, we're not going to change. We're not throwing inside the numbers, we're going to be what we are. Well, then get the quarterback that sort of then fits to accommodate that and draft a guy behind him as the guy that'll go behind him after a year or whatever.
Yeah. I for me personally, I can't think of a worse idea. I cannot think of a worse idea for this team to do, to go back to that, because look, Sean Payton is one of the greatest offensive minds in NFL history. I think we can say that, right? The extended success he had in New Orleans is unlike pretty much anything we've seen outside of guys like, I don't know, Bill Walsh, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he is going to say this offseason, I want to pay you $85 million to go away rather than keep you. I would rather pay you $85 million to go away. Why do I want that? Like, this isn't...
Well, for the reasons, hold on, but for the reasons I gave with it, like, you have a guy who's an offensive mastermind. For all the things you said are completely on point. Yes. The part that I take an issue and umbrage with would be to say this: what you get with an offensive mastermind head coach or offensive coordinator is a guy who's going to want his quarterback to run his offense. Let's not go any further down the line. That's absolutely what Shanahan doesn't want his quarterback to run his offense.
Okay, but that's not relevant because he's not running the Sean Payton offense this year. You look at the tape, you look at heat maps for Wilson, he has completely thrown his offense out and is only running the things Wilson can do.
He's not completely thrown his whole offense out. Yes, like I said, I just prefaced this. He's not running the pure Sean Payton offense fully that he ran with Drew Brees. No doubt about that. He's acclimated and done all he can to try to make Russell Wilson work within his system. He's taken, like he said, I think it was a coward last year. If I went in and I was dealing with Wilson, I take his greatest hits. I take those greatest hits and I build them into what we do. But it's also building into what we do. And what I'm talking about here is having an offense that instead it's, here's my offense. You need to run to some way. We'll build into some of what you do, but you need to work into what I do. A guy that I just heard talking about this today on the film with them, where there's stuff being scripted open that's on time within this Broncos offense, and he's not pulling the trigger and throwing it. Things that we've seen here for times, but that's what Payton's offense is built on, is timing and structure. That is the antithesis of what Wilson is. So he can bring 50% of the old school Wilson stuff to his 50% of the stuff. Wilson's still not going to do his 50% of his stuff because that's not Wilson's game. And that's what Payton's reflecting on here is, do I want to go down in flames not being able to run my whole system the way I want to run it, or run it partially the way I want to run it because I'm trying to salvage this whole Russell Wilson thing? And the answer is no. And the whole thing with this isn't a sudden thing that he's drawn upon. This is something that he's shown you for a long period of time was going to come down the gate. It came in the length of time it took them to negotiate that coaching decision. It came in the signing of Jared Stidham to this 2-year, $11 million deal when you had Russell Wilson's contract on deck. That was a key sign right there that he understood, no, the off-script guy is not really going to work in this offense. And he made that determination, I think, a long period of time ago here. He's going to make it work because they were locked into having to make it work for a second season because you're going to get out from the contract this past off season. But the whole point of what I'm saying here is you have a guy in Coach Carroll, Brendan, that knows Russell Wilson backwards and forwards. And rather than forcing him into even partially things that he doesn't do well, even partially, again, I'm saying it's the both thing. He's going to lean fully into what he does well. And I'm not saying, again, this is what I want to see done. This isn't what I say with my priority, but can I see a place within it that they go that direction and there could be a point that they find success within it? Yeah, you could. But I think to say that Payton has somehow taken this offensive playbook and Wilson has Hacketed him like Wilson did to Hackett last year, well, we're going to do my stuff. It's not been in my opinion, at all that. Payton is way too strong-minded of a guy to just allow his offense to get completely taken over by this quarterback who he himself has shown obvious signs from the get-go that he didn't completely buy in on. So that's where we come to is you can't force Russell into being a West Coast offensive quarterback. You can't force him into being a quarterback that's going to play on time and within structure. But can he find productivity and success if you formulate an offense completely around him? I guess, we'll learn this in the future. I think he probably goes to a team like Atlanta and not us anyway, which will have all of those parts and places and pieces, right? To put just that. He won't have to be a volume passer there. 50-50 pass run rate, good offensive line in front of him, big, tall receivers to throw to on the outside. We'll see if he goes to that and that happens. But I do think, and this makes it sound like I'm not a Russ supporter here. I'm not trying to be a Russ backer on it, but this failing with Peyton there, or this failing with Denver there with Hackett before him with the West Coast offense, it makes sense because that's not how you utilize Wilson's skill set.
Yeah, I just completely disagree. I think Peyton has bent over backwards to build a system. Like, they lead the league in checkdowns by far. All they do is check down, screen passes, and deep balls. Like, Peyton has mangled his playbook, is my
Well,
thing.
hold on then. With Wilson, when has Wilson in checkdowns and screens been the way that you utilize?
Well, that's
Wilson's
all he can
skill
do
set?
now. That's all he can do now. They got rid of all the stuff that he can't do for the most. There's very little stuff to, like, the stuff that Peyton loves from New Orleans in that playbook this year. I think Peyton has done everything he can, and maybe there's one or two guys out there that could maximize a little bit more. But I think that Denver offense has been customized around Wilson about as good as it can.
Well,
So
those weren't passes that he completed well or did well when he was here. Screen game was awful, and the swing passes were awful. So if you're talking that Peyton's leading into stuff that he didn't do well here, that somehow he's now magically doing well because it's all he does, I don't, again, I guess we'll have to agree to disagree on this. And again,
yeah.
I was just listening to an interview with a guy like Greg Cosell, who's been in the sport for 40 years, watches film all the time, tears through the all 22 all the time, who spoke to just these points on to why Wilson was being released here. He's saying, when I watch the tape, they're creating stuff on structure. Guys are breaking open, and Wilson's not pulling this trigger on the structure stuff. And that's Peyton's offense. Structure is what it is about. And so that's the part where when you talk about a guy in quarterback and Wilson, he's improvisation. He's off script. And Peyton is not, like, think about this as well, too, where Carroll builds things into, like, leaning into that improvisation, secondary routes, and all of that type of stuff that you have at run. That's not Peyton. He's not going to lean into that type of stuff because it leans away from structure. It leans away from the things he wants to do within his offense.
Yeah, I just think he did a lot of good work to try to do it. I think that he did do things he didn't want to do this year because this is what I have to work with, which that's the sign of a great coach, by the way. A coach who's like, okay, this is what I have to work with. It's not what I want, but I'm going to make it work. It's like Rudy Tomjanovich in basketball, who built a successful team around Hakeem Olajuwon and then built a successful team around, like, Moochie Norris. Completely contradictory styles of basketball, and he found a way to make it work. And I think Peyton probably did about as good as you can do. Like again, like, you're not, like, you look at the percentages of stuff that I think if you look at Wilson's heat map this year, it's basically the same as it was in Seattle. The Broncos ran very similar to the Schottenheimer offense, I think, if you take a look at it in totality.
Well, I definitely think I don't disagree with you that he's maybe done a lot to accommodate into Wilson. I'm not saying he just said, here, Wilson, take my playbook and you're going to run that. Not by any respect. But I will say that I don't think that he also attacked it in the same way Carroll attacked it, and where he looked at Wilson and said, let's lean into the things he does well. I think Peyton said, we'll lean partially into that, and partially you need to come and step up to the plate of what I do and what is my system. I don't think that he's the kind of coach that just bails out on his system to go fill around a player in Wilson that he didn't sign up for. He signed up to be the head coach of the Denver Broncos. He signed up to try to bring this reclamation project to bear and to do what he can to try to fix it. But that's not the same as being, this is my guy. And whether it was quotes about kissing babies or screaming into the sideline, there's a lot of this that was telegraphed, in my opinion. And I just don't think that that's indicative of the fact that he was bought into Russell Wilson, that he thought that this could work. I don't. I don't think that Jared Stitham does. I think that's a glaring sign. You're signing Russell Wilson to this huge, massive contract, and then you're going to go spend big backup money for his backup. That's not like any situation that exists in the league. Any quarterback that's being paid high-level money has a backup then that's going to be pretty cheap on the backup because you're trying to load balance it at that point. That was an indicator right there that he didn't fully buy in. And if you have there's a difference between, we're going to try to use some of what you do, but you got to fit to us, versus a coach who says, we're going to get the most out of you. And the reason that Coach Carroll does that, it's not to say that Coach Carroll's a better coach than Peyton. I'm not trying to say that. Like I said, everything you said about Peyton is on point. He is that good of a coach. I agree with you 100% there. It's just that Carroll, with the 10 years of backing and understanding in Wilson, knowing what he can do, what he can't do, the good, the bad, everything in between, will lean fully into just what he does well. And that was my only point on that, was just that's different than Peyton and what he does. Peyton's doing, it's a partial stroke versus a full stroke.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Peyton did some really nice stuff this year to modify his offense. I was actually really impressed. I thought he was going to do what you were talking about, which is just run my offense. And if you can't do it, then go away. He actually tried, it impressed me. He didn't just say, you're going to be Drew Brees. And
Yeah.
he could, I thought he might just be like, okay, either you're going to turn into Drew Brees right now, or I'm going to give up on you after 2 weeks. I was impressed.
I definitely am not shading Peyton in this situation. I think he's taken some low blows with Wilson in this, and at times it's put on Wilson as sort of the scapegoat for all this. But I do think as well, it's one that you could see where this wasn't going to work. A guy that runs the offensive scheme like he runs, and Wilson coming in, it's not these guys that have that kind of offensive mind and have that sort of genius kind of label associated with them. They don't operate with that. I'm going to let you run free and wild and do your own thing kind of thing. That's just not, and if you're not going to let Russell Wilson do that, then you're saddling him up and you're not letting him ride.
And by the way, actually, for whatever it's worth, I saw a chart earlier today that had EPA per play for quarterbacks on off script plays.
Mm-hmm.
Russ was not very high. Russ was like mediocre.
Yeah,
so
the receivers don't run secondary routes in Denver. That's the thing when you watch them play, though. Like Lockett and DK and those are guys that would break off their first route. What you watch with Denver and the receivers is that they stand there after the secondary play. And that's coaching, that's working on it in practice like they would always do. You just don't do it by happenstance. Okay, I'll run my secondary route. It's got to be something that, again, you buy into in utilization. And if you're not buying into because you want to keep everything on time, then you're not worried about secondary routes. You could give an F on that,
Yeah. And I actually made a video about this yesterday, and my theory, I would not be surprised if this is just it. I don't know if Wilson's playing football again. I seriously look at this and I'm going, okay, I made a list of teams that would consider it. It was like 10 teams that might need a new quarterback. Of those 10 teams, some of them are going to draft rookies, probably gets you down to like 7, right? Because 7 teams are probably going to get a day 1 starting rookie. One of those teams is going to take Baker Mayfield. One of those teams might take Ryan Tannehill. One of those teams might take Gardner Minshew.
Wait, hold on. Wait, you're at the point where you think there's people that have Gardner Minshew and Ryan Tannehill higher than Russ at this point?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, we definitely are in pretty harsh disagreement on this one.
Yeah,
I can't get into even the vicinity on that one.
Jameis Winston's better than Russ. I don't even think it's close anymore. I'm dead serious. The Denver Broncos would win that division with Jameis Winston at quarterback. I'm so serious. He would kill it in that Peyton offense. I'm telling you right now.
Yeah, I don't agree at all. I can't even come into the close vicinity on this one, man. I mean, if Jameis Winston's that valuable a player for a starting quarterback, then why has nobody sniffed at him in the last couple of years?
He was killing it with Sean Payton 2 years ago.
He was not killing it with Sean Payton. He was playing a game manager role where Sean Payton was highly, highly making sure that he could restrict him from throwing interceptions. He was playing in the boxed role of Drew Block against the Eagles a couple of weeks ago. That's what Sean Payton was having to do. He was out there slinging the rock around. Let's not revisionist history this one, Brendan. He was out there dinking and dunking Alvin Kamara, and Peyton was making sure that he was putting him in that box because it's understood with Jameis Winston, you start having him throw the ball around, he's going to intercept and throw a lot of turnovers. That's why Tampa moved off of him and went back and won the Super Bowl the year after they moved off of him. I completely disagree, but that's okay. It's going to be fun as you eat crow when you watch this offseason. He gets the starting job, and Jameis Winston
I think he's somebody but I wouldn't be shocked if like the opportunity didn't arise, right? Because there are only going to be so many opportunities. By the way, some of these teams might be like, let's give it one more year with Kenny Pickett. Let's give it one more year with Desmond Ridder. Like, and I know those guys don't look very good, but it's possible that they're just like, I'd rather go forward with this than go get an aging veteran. Some teams probably going to do that.
Is it a possibility? Sure, it's a possibility. When you're talking about Russ coming off this, a big part of why Russ is being released right now is not because Russ has fallen on his face in the football field and he can no longer play the quarterback position. The big point that comes into this is cost. The Denver Broncos signed up for a big amount of cost. They don't want to sign up for more cost. If you remove Russ and his cost and what he's going to charge to a team like Atlanta, where he's got to take a lower end deal, and he's willing to do so as part of that reputational cleanup, and because he's already made hundreds of millions, and it's not about the contract at that point, it's about elongating his career, then he's going to have a lot of teams that are going to line up to be willing to sign up for him. Maybe not like dozens or a dozen, But there'll be a couple of teams that'll be very happy to make him then the starting quarterback at a pretty cheap rate and put him with an offense where he doesn't have to be a high volume passer, and they can let him be kind of what he is. But we'll see how it plays out. That's my firm prediction. I don't think Jameis Winston's being given a starting opportunity. I don't think Gardner Minshew is being given a starting opportunity this offseason. And if I'm wrong about that, I'll own that on my side. But that's as strong a feeling as I could have on anything else. Like those guys will be.
I don't know if it's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I am wondering, like, this guy hasn't been good in 3 years. This guy has had 3 straight coaches that couldn't wait to get away from him. Like, I do wonder, and is he going to be willing to play for like minimum money? Is he going to be willing to play for 3-4 million? Like,
well, that's the part where you might be right about the retirement comes up to where if he's not willing to want to reclamate, where he's like, I don't play for less than this costs, because he's not getting a big contract. But I am doing a little bit of anticipation here that he wants to play for a long period of time, and that he feels like he's not gotten the best of shakes, and that's going to create at least a hunger to keep going. And if that's the case, no team's going to be willing to give him a big money at this point.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just not buying it. I've seen too many advanced metrics that tell me that Wilson is just bad now, and that the touchdown interception ratio is like the rotten cheese. You know how some coaches say, don't eat the rotten cheese?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think it's kind of rotten cheese here. Like, he's below average in EPA per play. He's below average in all these other metrics that I actually look at that I think are way more valuable than something like touchdown interception ratio. And I'm like, he's just not very good anymore.
I do completely agree there. I don't think that he's necessarily a really good quarterback anymore. And like I said, with the Seattle and bringing him on here, it had a lot to do with the fact that he is so cheap at that point, and the bang you're getting for the buck, the fact you save the money, and the belief at that point that I can build the team around in a way that makes something work. And it's a narrow doorway to walk through, but it's just a doorway I could see presenting itself. It's not the doorway I would choose as option A, or that I want to go to, but just that if proverbially this played down to where you could find finding some success in that way. I think that he can give you some effectiveness at that point, especially if you're not having to pay 15, 16, 17% of your salary cap to Russell Wilson. And that cost is the big part of this too. It's not just that play, but that cost is the looming part. It's the 7 days after the end of the football season, the Broncos were going to have to sign up for guaranteeing his base salary for the next year. And that was the big part of that's making this deal happen, as much as just the play and the performance and the ill fit between Sean Payton and him. But we'll see how it goes. It'd be fun to track and see how this one plays out.
Did you see Mark Schlereth on the Coward?
Yeah. Yes, I did.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. You can tell he really doesn't like Russ. You can tell that Schlereth really can't stand him.
Yeah, I think it was a great soundbite by him and what he talked about. And what's interesting is the Schlereth things he talked about, of course, were all the hot topics that we discussed over the years with Russ that used to drive us crazy, right? It was the same kind of stuff. And I think even your point on the statistical part of this, it doesn't tell the whole story of Russ and where he's at and how he's playing. And that's what used to trick us through the years, as we look at his bottom line stats. And that'd be what a lot of the pro Russ people would lean on that solely. And it's like, well, the eye test has to factor in here too. That has to be, something that's there. And I'm sure Schlereth remember with him, he does the play-by-play. So he was already doing that, meeting with the Russ camp, watching the film on the teams. And then he comes to Denver after that point, right? For doing that for years as a play-by-play and covering even time Seahawk games. So he's been probably well aware, as much as even just average Denver fan, about sort of the failings and limitations that were there with Russ.
Right. Okay, got a couple chats in here. Upo, thank you for the $5. This Wilson discussion is great. He'll never be welcomed back. He took shots at the organization. I'm glad to be at a place that wants to win. Right. Yeah, I mean,
about that one.
Yeah, I really do think that Pete just felt incredibly betrayed that Russ asked for a trade. I think he thought like, oh, we're like a married couple. We're never going to split up, even when things are bad. We're going to love each other forever. Even, because I'm thinking to that last year where he was in Seattle, every post-game press conference, Pete would throw Russ under the bus. Like every single one. He sounded like a coach who couldn't wait to get rid of the quarterback. And then we find out in the offseason, getting rid of the quarterback was the last thing Pete wanted to do. And I was like, well, why? Why did you spend all that time throwing him under the bus in your press conferences if you didn't want to get rid of him? And then I kind of started thinking, I was like, oh, he's kind of looking at it like a married couple. They've been together so long. They've done everything together for so long that he's just like, there are going to be bumps. There are going to be problems, disagreements, but that's my guy. We're linked together forever, no matter what. And then Russ demands the trade. And I think that really, really hurt Pete. deeply.
I can see it doing it too. Pete's shown himself to be a very loyal guy through time, so that definitely adds up in tracks, And how can you not feel a little bit betrayed in that scenario because of that at that point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think this is the number one obstacle to any kind of a reunion. Anyway, maybe not number one, but it's certainly an obstacle that I don't believe can be overcome.
Yeah, if he didn't burn down the bridge, he definitely cut out a lot of the slats.
Mm-hmm. Pierce, thank you for the $2 or $1.99. I'm all in on taking Wilson back.
There's
Yeah.
the folks that are in that 20%, 7%, I would say are very, very, passionate on that stance of it, and that they would take it back. So it is out there. Yeah. Pierce.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's out there with the fans. I don't think this team would actually do it. I think the team, I think that it would be like remember when this was like maybe a year and a half ago when some Steelers beat reporter asked Mike Tomlin if they were thinking about bringing back Antonio Brown?
Mm-hmm.
And Tomlin looks at him like he's stupid, and then he's just like, that's not happening. Next question.
Yeah. No, I think so too. I mean, Schneider doesn't want Mark Rodgers and have to deal with that train again. And it's not going to be a fit from that standpoint, I think either, especially if half the rumors that we heard were indeed true.
Taker, thank you for the $5. Russ got $125 million and doesn't have to play again. It's a pretty sweet deal.
Yeah, man, Rodgers has done the work for him on that. You can't deny that agent's gotten him every last red letter nickel he could possibly get in this sport, and he's done his job by his client. That's for sure.
But yeah, I mean I mean, there's been this like over the last 32, 33 hours on social media, a lot of people feeling bad for him. Yeah, I looked at his last tweet and a lot of people replying to it. Oh, the Broncos did you dirty. I don't think there's too much dirty about giving him $125 million for 2 years of bad play.
No, Russ is made out fine in this, and he's going to, as I believe, get still another starting job elsewhere, and probably he's going to get not full pick of the litter, but he's going to get to choose where he wants to go on top of it. So Russ coming out here smelling like roses on this. He's fine.
Daniel Bailey, thank you for the $1.99. Just want to see Russ ball out to laugh at Broncos. That would be pretty funny.
It would be pretty hilarious if he does go somewhere and they actually find their footing and come back to you guys just didn't do it right there.
Yeah, like. Let's say it's Atlanta for a second. Just a thought experiment. They're firing Arthur Smith at the end of the year, right? They have to.
It comes down to your assessment of the quarterback position, where it's like, well, Arthur, did you mess up Desmond Ridder, or was Desmond Ridder really not the guy? Because that's what that comes down to. It's a little bit like the Stefanski thing with the Browns. Like, how much of an evaluation can you make when you brought me in as an offensive head coach and you've not really ever gotten me the quarterback? You got me Matt Ryan at the very end of his career when he could no longer throw more than 8 yards. And then you give me a cavalcade of some players through here for a couple of years. And then you draft this guy in a 3rd round that you just happen to select because he just dropped and nobody wanted him. And he's not done anything as far as Ridder goes to show anybody that he's going to be a pro in the near future, be it whether I'm the head coach or anybody else is the head coach. So I have a hard time on that one, Brendan, like I would with Stefanski. I'd be the same way with Arthur, where I go, I don't know if you can really, if you bring an offensive head coach, you got to go get him a QB so he can run his offense. And Arthur does so much to generate so much for that Falcon team in the ground game, and what he does with the ingenuity in their rushing attack and their blocking schemes, that if you don't give him the quarterback to make the rest of the offense work, I don't know if you can give him that short shrift like that.
Yeah. I mean, would Arthur Smith be a fit for Wilson? Like, Arthur Smith made his bones because he turned Tannehill into a really good quarterback for a few years, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but how do you think about how he did it with it? It's a lot of Tannehill under center, running play action, low volume passing attack, a ground game that attacks all across the offensive scheme. So outside zone, pitch plays, duo blocks, combo blocks, zone, man. You're going to get everything under the sun in his run game. There's not one thing that he's just going to lean on to try to do. So when it comes to that, Russ is going to immediately have a top 3 ground game to work with right out the gate. He's going to run the under center stuff, which will meld well with the rollout, which with Tannehill, of course, what helped Tannehill, because now you get the guy rolling out off the play action. Now it's less about him reading things in the pocket and being great in the pocket. Now it's him about having simplified reads to the edge, or he uses his legs and goes. So things get very simplified down. That's the key with Russ to me, is that you get him into an offense that simplifies things down, and then you find some effectiveness with him. You have him go through a lot of moving parts and X's and O's and be here and be on that he's going to fail at that. That stuff will fall flat.
Yeah, that might be okay if they keep him. I think they asked Arthur Blank a couple weeks ago about Smith, and he said, "We'll see," which usually means, "Yeah, I'm going to fire his ass."
Arthur's not shy, right? He didn't wait
Mm,
long after Quinn had been to a Super Bowl to let him out the door. So, he definitely is not a guy to just sort of sit and wait on his laurels on that. And that might be the way it goes down.
yeah, because I think Wilson should be looking for the veteran coach that is trying to save his job. If like it's a first year coach, like let's say the Falcons fire him and hire Ben Johnson. I think Ben Johnson would want to go get some young guy that he can mold over a period of time,
Yeah.
right?
You're
Because
right. That's not where
so
Wilson wants to go for
yeah,
sure.
so you'd probably want to try to find a situation where like the coach is hanging on by a thread and he needs to try something to mix it up with the quarterback
Mhm.
position, which
Tomlin.
yeah, if you believe Tomlin's job is in jeopardy, which I kind of don't.
It might not be. But just
I,
in
I
that, and not if not him exactly that mold of a guy
yeah.
that's maybe in that kind of area thing. And then that a guy that will then lean fully in. I think the most important thing, that's a good point. I think that's on the forefront. And then also just in tandem with that, you're leaning into Russell Wilson's skill set, right? You're not going to come here and I got my OC here. My OC is going to give you the playbook and you're going to run that playbook and that's the way, or we're going to partially take on what you do. You're going to take him on as a quarterback. You got to buy in on that process at that point and all the way so.
Mhm. Let's see here. One more Flamex dot. I'll just call him Flamex. Flamex, thank you for the 4.99. I find it hilarious that Wilson stated that he wanted to go to a winning franchise and be protected, yet he's been sacked 100 times in 2 seasons, and only 30 total games because he's now missed 2 games in each of the 2 seasons. But yeah, I'll say it. I think that offensive line's been really good this year. Last year, not so much. This year, it's been a really good offensive line.
Yeah, and the thing that I think has eroded most with Wilson through the last couple of years, Brendan, with this has been pocket presence and movement within the pocket, right? Going to the pirouette move too often, not finding gaps and lanes to step up and through in the pocket. If the rush is coming, it just sort of ends up enveloping him a bit. There's none of that feel there, and that's also what leads to some of those sacks, where just a subtle step to the right or left, a little bit of climbing the pocket here can save your bacon. But instead, he'll just kind of end up standing either stagnant or go to that weird just back up and try to get out the back door of the pocket and it doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, they were highlighting a couple plays from the New England game where he's got a clean pocket and he just starts spinning around until he gets
Yeah.
sacked. It's just really, really bad.
He's just the sense. It's, quarterbacks, they'll say the good ones have that where you don't even, they don't see it. It's almost like they can almost like feel the turf with the feet pounding behind them and they can feel that. And because they'll have that innate sense where they start to move just as the defender's got his hands on them. And that's the thing that seems to be missing heavily right now with Wilson as he's gotten into his 30s is that sense of being able to, it's coming close, get that step away from it.
Yeah, but yeah, seriously, no Garrett Bowles slander allowed. Garrett Bowles kind of kept his promise. He's been great when he's been out there.
Yeah.
When he called up Russell and was like, "Hey, we're not going to let you get hit here," he's actually doing his job. He
Yeah.
actually kept that promise. He got hurt last year, not his fault.
Like I said, minors, he's definitely rounding into one of the better ones himself. So it's a good point. Give me 1 second here. Just 2 seconds.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah, so I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the Wilson thing tonight because it is one of the most interesting things going on right now. And I know it's a Seahawks adjacent, right? It's Seahawks adjacent. It's not really related to us, but it's kind of related to us. So I did want to spend a little bit of time on it. I thought for sure somebody would bring it up. And actually, you guys in the chat really behaved tonight. You guys did a great job actually just keeping it to the task ahead in the Steelers game. Let's see here. Jeffrey, thank you for the member for 14 months. Don't feel like changing our QB situation improves our offense. If me, the announcers, and the cheap seats know your calls, that means your offense is dumb. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, if even if you think that Sean Payton was a bad fit for Russell Wilson, which I think I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that at all, really. At least not in any way that matters. Like going from Sean Payton to Shane Waldron and Pete Carroll, like that's not better.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, we just got a member message from Jeffrey, and I was saying, don't feel like changing our QB situation improves our offense. If me, the announcers, and the cheap seats know your calls, that means your offense is dumb. And yeah, I kind of agree with that. Like, I know there's an argument to be made that Sean Payton's a bad fit for Russell Wilson, right?
Mm-hmm.
I still think there is a significant downgrade going from Sean Payton to Shane Waldron, that even if it's a little bit of a better fit, still that loss of knowledge, loss of ability, there's something there that would get lost as well. I don't think that Waldron would be better for Wilson than Payton was necessarily.
I think it's a fair point. Yeah, I would agree there. It's more about Carroll's influence on that situation and his heavy-handed approach to Waldron for me than it is Waldron at that point, and for good and bad. I don't mean that for necessarily just all good, but also for the bad side of that brings with it too.
I mean, for whatever it's worth, in 2021, it worked out very, very middlingly, which is not a real word, but I just made it a real word.
True. It is true.
Yeah, that was 2 years ago. This is a different, although I do feel like he slimmed up a little bit this year and actually looked more evasive than he did the year before. So maybe the age thing isn't that big of a deal.
It's hard, and maybe the line it would be better placed than it was 2 years ago, especially if after the moves you make potentially this offseason with tandem of Cross and Lucas coming a step forward for another year. And again, saying this where I'm not trying to I'm trying to make the hard sell on those. I'm really not. I just it's that one narrow pathway where I could see. And again, it's coming from it's not coming from a place of this is the great way to go. Like Jeffrey says, I don't want to change the kid, staying with Geno, drafting a quarterback. That to me is the smartest approach and path at this point. But that this team does go that route by some weird, like you say, Carroll comes back to, we're married. You don't leave your wife. You come back to your wife, even if she's made some mistakes and said some real mean things.
Yeah. Oh, are you watching Fargo season 6? Season 5 yet?
I haven't yet, but I will be. I've watched the other ones.
No, that thing you just said, it made me think about this current season. I'm not going to get into why, but it just made me think about that because I just caught up with it last night and I was like, ugh.
That can be a prevailing spirit, right?
Yeah.
People, it's the devil,
Yeah. And besides, you kind of have to defend Russ here because I'm taking such an extremist view on it. Like that's what's going to happen. I have a very extremist view here. There, the analytics nerds on X these days, the Seahawks guys, I disagree with them on a lot, but this is an area where I actually have found myself in alignment with them on when it comes to quarterback play. Like they believe that Geno's a good quarterback because of analytics tells them they are. They believe Wilson's a bad quarterback because of these analytics. And in that area, I actually have found myself largely agreeing with them.
I think to the point of the poll I ran last night of almost 1,000 people, 72% feel very closely aligned with that. Those people, like I said in the chat, not just the poll results, but the people I was hearing from within the chat were very loud in where their stance was on this one. It wasn't merely I wouldn't let them back. It was like hell to the no.
Yeah. I definitely fall in that hell to the no category for many different reasons, but I think we were obligated to spend a little bit, at least some time talking about it tonight, because it is a fascinating thing that is going on in the NFL right now. And all the drama of the last 24 hours has been very interesting. And look, no matter what else, that is one of the most important players in franchise history. That is one of the most important players we've ever had. To see things going down the way that it is with him, to where it's at least conceivable this is the end of his career, and at the very least is going to be a tremendous fall from grace as he goes to some minimal contract on a third team, is like it means something.
It does. It's also a cautionary tale to people that look at the grass being greener on the other side of the fence. You're never going to be loved up as you will be in your original home that was drafting you. I don't care what sport we're talking about, basketball, baseball, football, hockey. You're always going to be loved up best there. And when you leave, it gets cold-blooded real quick.
All right. So I think that's going to do it for the show. We spent, I think we said everything we need to say about the Steelers game. We're both feeling pretty good about it. Not amazing, but we're feeling that 3-game winning streak coming on. We're feeling that playoff berth coming on. There's a chance we could clinch this week. It's a lot to ask. More than likely,
needs a tie.
Yeah. More than likely, we are going to, I think, clinch. If we win this game, we probably clinch before kickoff in our game next week against Arizona.
That's true, which would give us kind of the de facto bye to rest guys if that does go that
and
way.
I hope we do. But
I do
we'll
too.
cross that bridge when we get to it.
When we beat the Steelers.
Yeah. All right, guys. So thank you for coming out, everybody. It was a great show tonight. We will be back on Tuesday to do the post game win, lose, or tie. And we will break down whatever needs to be broken down about these Seahawks going into their final game of the year. But look, this is a big one, guys. And I know that just a couple weeks ago, there were a lot of people who were kind of checked out on this team. I know there were a lot of people who were even in the camp of like, let's just lose these games and try to shake things up. But, you know, this is kind of a playoff game. This feels like a playoff game for both teams. So it's I think it's time to get back behind him. I think it's time to get excited again. I think it's time to hope for bigger and better things. So let's just hit it and move on to the weekend and watch the boys get this win. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.